It was the day after Christmas, when I called upon my friend, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. He was lounging upon the sofa in a purple dressing gown, and beside him lay a battered felt hat and a plump goose. Holmes explained that a commissionaire named Peterson had brought them that morning. The man had come upon a fellow in the Tottenham Court Road who was carrying the goose over his shoulder. A scuffle broke out. The fellow dropped his bird and fled. And Peterson, too honest to keep the articles himself, brought them to Holmes. The hat was old and worn, but Holmes turned it over in his hands with the keenest interest. He examined the lining, the brim, the discoloration, and the grease stains with the quiet intensity I had come to admire. As for the goose, a small card was tied to its leg, reading, "For Mrs. Henry Baker." Peterson had already taken the bird home to roast, but not before Holmes had made one remarkable discovery. I confessed that I could see nothing remarkable about the hat. Holmes smiled and set it upon the table. "On the contrary, Watson, it speaks volumes. The man who owned this hat was highly intellectual, as shown by its great size. He was once in comfortable circumstances, but has fallen upon evil days. He has foresight, and yet has lost his self-respect. He leads a sedentary life and goes out seldom. His wife has ceased to love him." I laughed at this catalogue of conclusions drawn from so shabby an article. Holmes, unperturbed, indicated each point with quiet precision. The grease, the broken elastic, the stains of lime cream, the hairs caught within. He added that the man had been ill recently, and that he had no gas laid on in his house, deducing this from the tallow stains. I shook my head in admiration. Even after so many years, his methods never failed to astonish me. But still it seemed a small enough matter, until Peterson burst in again, pale and trembling. Peterson held out his hand. There, gleaming upon his palm, lay a brilliant blue stone, no larger than a bean, and yet of such purity and radiance that it seemed almost to pulse with inner fire. Holmes sat bolt upright. "Good heavens!" he cried. "Peterson, do you know what you have there?" The commissionaire stared blankly. "It is the Blue Carbuncle," said Holmes. "The Countess of Morcar's Blue Carbuncle, the gem which has been the subject of such a hue and cry these 3 days past. I recalled reading of the theft at the Hotel Cosmopolitan. A plumber named John Horner had been arrested on suspicion, though he protested his innocence with great feeling." Holmes examined the stone under his lens, then locked it away in his strongbox. "This is a matter that goes far beyond a lost hat," he said quietly. "We must find Henry Baker at once, and then trace how this jewel found its way into the crop of his Christmas goose. The game, Watson, is very much afoot." Holmes placed an advertisement, and by evening a tall, stout gentleman with a weather-beaten face appeared at Baker Street. He was Henry Baker, and his relief at hearing that his hat had been recovered was unmistakable. Holmes returned the hat and offered him a replacement goose, at which Baker was effusively grateful. Holmes, with apparent casualness, asked where the original bird had been obtained. Baker replied that he had purchased it from a salesman in the Alpha Inn near the museum, where a goose club had been formed. He knew nothing of any stone, and Holmes let him go, satisfied. As the door closed, I turned to my companion. "He is clearly innocent." Holmes nodded. "As innocent as a man can be. But the goose came from somewhere, and the stone was placed inside it by someone. We must visit this Alpha Inn without delay. The chain of possession runs from the Countess's jewel case through some dark passage to that humble bird, and we have not yet reached its darkest link. At the Alpha Inn, the landlord directed us to a salesman named Breckenridge at Covent Garden Market. Holmes and I arrived to find a large, red-faced man arranging his stall with an air of immense self-importance. He was plainly ill-tempered and received Holmes's inquiries about the geese with sharp suspicion, insisting he was not in the habit of being pestered. Holmes, nothing daunted, tried a small wager on the origin of the birds, whether they were country or town-bred, which drew Breckenridge into argument long enough for Holmes to press his question. The man admitted the geese had come from a Mrs. Oakshott of Brixton, but before Holmes could extract more, a small, ferret-faced fellow appeared asking the very same questions. Breckenridge drove him off furiously. Holmes drew the man aside before he could vanish. The fellow turned pale with fear, then confessed in a trembling voice that his name was James Ryder, and that he was head attendant at the Hotel Cosmopolitan, the very hotel from which the carbuncle had been stolen. Back at Baker Street, Ryder collapsed into a chair and told his wretched story. He had known of the carbuncle and conspired with a woman named Catherine Cusack to steal it. Horner the plumber was deliberately called in to give them occasion to incriminate him. Ryder took the stone himself, then fled to his sister, Mrs. Oakshott, who raised geese. In a panic, fearing discovery, he had seized one of the birds and thrust the stone down its throat. But in his terror, he had taken the wrong goose, one already marked for the Alpha Inn Club. The right bird, a white one with a bar on its tail, was already gone. He had traced it through desperate, fruitless hours. Holmes listened to all of this with perfect stillness, his fingers pressed together. Ryder fell to his knees, weeping and begging, terrified of prison and ruin. Holmes regarded him for a long, silent moment. Then he rose, opened the door, and said simply, "Get out." I stared at Holmes in astonishment. He closed the door and turned back to the fire. "After all, Watson," said he, "it is the season of forgiveness. Horner is safe. There is no evidence against him now that Ryder has fled. The Countess has her carbuncle, and as for Ryder, he is not a dangerous man. He was frightened into crime by fear of poverty, as so many are. Send him to jail now, and you make him a hardened criminal for life. But keep him from the dock, and he is yet young enough to be saved. Besides, it is Christmas." He smiled and stretched himself before the fire. I shook my head, half amused, half in wonder. The Blue Carbuncle lay safe in the strong box. An innocent man would go free. A frightened sinner had been given a second chance. And Sherlock Holmes sat contentedly among his case notes, indifferent to reward, as always, asking nothing more than the keen intellectual interest of the chase itself.